Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Rae Walaska. Rae is a military spouse, mom to 2 boys, and business owner. As the boss lady for Murder and Mayhem, you could say she researches and writes nonfiction thrillers. Rae's business offers true crime tours, ghost tours, murder mystery scavenger hunts, and murder mystery parties in San Diego, California, and Jacksonville, Florida. She has spent countless hours reading, researching, and writing about these subjects as she has developed new tours and party scripts over the years. Even though she is submerged in the world of nonfiction almost daily, she loves to read fictional thrillers, mysteries, and romance novels in her spare time. Rae has had a love of reading since a young age and tries to escape into a book every night before bed. She averages reading 125 to 150 books a year. This year, she has actually set a goal to read less. Only 100 books is the goal, as she is prioritizing time with family, traveling, and business growth in 2023. Welcome to the show, Rae.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad we were able to connect over books. Listeners, Rae and I have known each other for a very long time, since back into our Sicily days. So
Yes.
I had, as I've been doing this account and this posting a little bit more, I keep hearing people say, we love thrillers, we love thrillers. And it was not a genre that I had read. So I recruited someone to come on and talk to us about thrillers today. So I am super excited to have you today.
Like I said, super excited to be here. Love reading. That's always been really an important part of my life, and it's kind of been my escape. So
Yeah.
excited to chat books this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm a mom, a military spouse, and I'm an entrepreneur. For the longest time, I kind of saw it as more, I was in the entertainment industry until someone, I think it was about a year ago, mentioned like, oh, so you're a writer. And I had never thought of myself that way. But, after taking a bit to mull over it, I was kind of like, you're right. I am a writer because I have to write all these scripts for our tours, characters for my mystery parties and scenarios and clues, and it kind of hit me that I am a writer.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think just in hearing, the bio about all the research that you do and having talked to some authors on the show now, that's what they talk about doing, right? Is doing all this research to be able to synthesize it into a digestible format. And that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. So, when you interview your authors, it's similar concept, just I'm presenting it in a different manner than they are. They're presenting it in book form. We are presenting it in a personal, a more almost intimate manner because we have tour guides that, put a little theatrics behind it and go tell these stories. On all of our tours, we go to the spots where like the crimes took place. And so it kind of makes it a little more realistic, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, it's almost like I'm imagining, right, like a play or a drama being unfolding across the streets as you do these tours a little bit.
Exactly.
And you're writing that. So you're a screenwriter, let's say.
Yeah, I guess, I never thought of it that way either.
So how long have you been doing these tours?
Yeah, so I have had my business for almost 14 years.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so it started when I was a stay-at-home mom, and with being a military spouse, it's hard to have a career when you have to move every couple of
Yeah.
years for your significant other. And so um, I had been a stay-at-home mom for a year, and I was kind of starting to get a little bored, and so I was like, I need to do something, but it's got to be flexible. And
Yeah.
I decided that being an event planner was the way I wanted to go, but I was going to do it through murder mystery parties.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun.
Yep. And then we launched the tours about 11 years ago in San Diego when we lived there.
Okay. So had you had a career previous to having children with moving around with the military?
Yes. So I
Okay.
actually worked in hotels and hospitality.
Okay.
and I was a sales and event manager. So that
Okay.
was kind of where I knew that I really enjoyed planning events.
Yeah.
And while I was in college, I had worked at a hotel that was a historic property. And at that time, I was tasked with finding a source of revenue during their off season. And we came up with the idea of doing murder mystery weekends there because we could rent hotel rooms, we could use our restaurants, our banquet space, kind of pull
Wow.
everything together. And during that time, we had a lady custom write a mystery. It arrived. It was only 8 pieces of paper. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be fired. So I took it home. I embellished it. I did all this extra stuff. I like worked with the cooks in the kitchen and we're like, hey, can you call in and give clues during the party? And just
So
created this
fun.
really amazing experience. And at the end, someone comes to me and was like, when's the next one? I was like, oh, shoot, I have to
Yeah.
write another one now.
Oh my goodness. So you found your calling like that. I was just wondering if you had done the whole like pick up and move your job with every duty station that even before having children, right? That can become tiring in itself.
So I didn't actually open my own business till like 7 years later.
Okay.
Actually, I take it back. It would have been 8 years after I'd had that job, and I had tried doing the career, actually working with Enterprise Rent a Car. But every time we moved, I had to be brought back down to a certain level. Like you couldn't continue up the
Yeah.
ladder. It was like we felt like I was playing shoots and ladders. You're like up 3 rungs, down two. Up 4 rungs, down five. And so
Yeah.
that's where it definitely became hard, and why I decided to start my own business.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing because I feel like I'm kind of at that point in our military moves where I'm like, okay, I need something that I'm not going to be starting from scratch every time we move.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
it just gets so frustrating, especially if you're what I call like a striver, someone who really tries to do well and wants to go up that ladder, to get knocked down for things that aren't your fault and that they don't, it just, yeah, it makes it really frustrating. So I kind of you just decided to take control of my future at that point.
yeah. Okay. So were you living in San Diego at that time? So you're launching this new business in San
So I actually
Diego.
lived in Washington when
Oh
we
my
launched the
goodness.
business.
Okay.
Yeah, so we lived in Washington. That's where I launched the murder mystery parties.
Okay.
And it was an amazing experience, but it didn't go, like most things in life, did not go how I expected. I thought I'd
Sure.
be doing home parties for people. My very first customer was a restaurant,
Okay.
and it was a mom and pop. And so we basically every month they would hold a murder mystery, and every month I wrote a new one.
Wow. All
Yeah.
right. Okay. So then you're doing these home parties and then you move again to San Diego.
No. We moved, let's see, we went from Washington to DC.
Okay.
And that was a very fun move. I actually had during our move, I had my printer, which I still have it. I have this ginormous printer because I have a laser printer,
Okay.
and I had my laptop, and I kid you not, I was putting together a party on the move from Washington to DC. So every night that we were staying in the hotel, my husband would have to carry this giant printer in.
Oh my
And when we were
goodness.
driving, I'd be working on the files, and then we'd get into the hotel room and I'd print it out. And then, so a couple of days of that, I'd build out their
Okay.
whole party. And then we shipped it from, I don't even remember what city we shipped it from. Like it was before we had gotten up that morning on our drive. It was just
Yeah.
very crazy. But kind of the beauty of what I was doing was it worked with our lifestyle that we were
Yeah.
living. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, and then, so you're doing these murder mysteries. Were you like, I just want to take the next step, and is why you decided to launch into the tours, or how did those come about?
Yeah, so I kind of fell into it. So yeah, so we had moved from Washington, we moved to DC, then I moved to Iowa, and then we moved to San Diego.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And in that time, I had another child also. But when we were in San Diego, I had partnered with a gentleman who had a pirate ship that sailed the San Diego Bay, and we were
Okay.
doing murder mystery parties on the weekends aboard his ship. and amazing experience. I made great friends with his crew. Well, one day he calls me and says, I have to sell my ship. It's being moved to Hawaii. So I'm giving you notice that we won't be able to do these parties anymore.
Oh.
But I'm not telling the crew. I will tell them the day the ship is leaving.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I knew like some of these were single parents who relied on him
Yeah.
for income. And it was just like, they had become my friends. And I felt horrible that I'd been put in this position that I couldn't tell them they were going to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
But I didn't necessarily understand why the business owner was doing that, but I knew it wasn't my position to tell them, even though I really wanted to.
Yeah.
So I, at that point, was like, I have to do something. I want to offer all these people a job. So I came up with the idea of doing a murder mystery scavenger hunt. And in less than 30 days, I wrote the scavenger hunt, launched it, and got it stable so that the
Wow.
day he fired them all, I offered all of them a job.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I have the chills. What a story.
Yeah. And that would have been, well, that was like 11 and a half years ago, because that's what launched the tours. And some of them to this day still work for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Because that's how is like if you're not local to the area, how are you recruiting the tour guides, right? And
Yeah.
making and finding
So in the
people for you.
time, so we lived in San Diego 2 years. I
Okay.
launched the tours a year into our tour there. So I lived there for 1 year while I operated my business. The rest of the time I have ran it long distance, including from Italy.
Wow. I didn't realize you were doing all that. I knew you were always very busy, but I did not realize you had a business going on in the
Yeah.
background
So I
either.
actually ran two businesses when I lived in Italy. I also have a marketing company.
Okay.
And so during the time when we lived in Italy, I got a stateside manager who handled anything like, because I run my own phones. So I had a stateside manager who ran my phones for me for tours. I still
Okay.
handled all emails and any major big client projects. Similar to this, I scheduled via Zoom and just told them, hey, I'm in Italy, so we'll need to work around that a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but so I was in Italy, I really bumped my marketing company because you can do that from anywhere.
Sure.
And I ended up hiring on three military spouses while I was there to assist me with doing social media, graphic design, stuff like that.
Oh, wow. Wow, I am like so impressed. This is
Yeah.
awesome.
And I taught fitness classes on base, which is
Yeah.
what most people like kind of recognize that I did.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you and your husband are big triathletes, correct? And I'm just like, you are so impressive with your time management and how you fit it all in.
A little bit of a workaholic, and I'm also a night owl, so I tend to like cram a lot of stuff at night after everyone's went to bed.
Okay. All right. So now today you have tours in Jacksonville, Florida and San Diego. So listeners, if you are in those areas, are the scavenger hunts still going on?
Yes, so
Okay.
currently I only have the scavenger hunt in San Diego. It's in the Gaslamp Quarter. It's called the
Okay.
Whodunit Gaslamp. It's a fictional story where you go solve a murder mystery.
Oh, I I'm gonna find a babysitter and my
Yeah.
husband and I are going. That sounds so fun, right up my alley. And then so when you are writing these, are you using, it sounds like crimes that have happened locally, or are you also making up fictional stories as well?
So on those scavenger hunts, they're completely fictional.
Okay.
So it is I do work in a little bit of history and like local buildings. So,
Sure.
for instance, on the scavenger hunt, the stories that Dick has went out for a night on the town, he passes out, and during that time, his business partner is murdered. Well, he wakes up the next morning in one of the parks downtown, and he's being arrested because he's the one who is the prime suspect. Well, he claims he didn't do it, but he unfortunately does not remember what he did the night before.
Okay.
So the guests on our tour are taking the pocket items that he has on his body and are building an alibi for him. But while
Okay.
they're doing that, they're also catching or gathering clues to figure out who truly killed Dick's business partner, Buddy. And so we take them to businesses that Dick had visited, which are actual businesses down there. But we also have picked historic buildings that are some of the most popular ones. And so sometimes you might learn a little bit of history about the building. Um, but it's all meshed together to create this fictional story about Dick.
Oh, that's
So,
so fun. Okay. And then the true crime tours obviously are crimes that
yes.
have happened locally, but you're also
Yeah.
still writing scripts for that to be presented.
Yeah, so we've got the true crime tours. Those are completely nonfiction. I research like murders and crimes that took place in the area. And then we create a route out of it, or a
Okay.
walking tour where, in most cases, like in San Diego, it's usually about 1 mile, an hour and a half. And we go from
Okay.
stop to stop and we tell you about murders and crimes that took place at those locations. And there's also some like little fun tidbits, like where the coroner's building used to be. And, back in the 1800s, they didn't have refrigeration. So the bodies were put in the basement, like just little
Wow.
fun bits. And those locations just happen to be downtown. So it fits in perfect. And then for the ghost tours, we do a combination of history and supernatural or paranormal, where we talk about the history of the buildings and how that correlates with the paranormal and ghost experiences. For the ghost tours, they are a combination of history and paranormal. And so we research like the history of the buildings and how that, partners with the paranormal stories. We visit theaters, hotels, and stuff like that have a super interesting history. And a lot of the buildings down there in San Diego are pretty old. So that's really neat too. And the architecture is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. We just had it overnight recently. My mom was here, so she gave us a night away, and we stayed downtown. And I feel like it's just an area we haven't explored too much solely because I feel like with the kids, you don't get to see as much, right? Your kids are busy, but we were able to, hang out and really look around. I'm like, this is a really cool area. We need to come back and learn more. So,
Yeah, it is such a neat area. And it used to be the red light district of San Diego, used to be
oh,
Sailor's Row. Old Town was originated first, which is
okay.
kind of contrary to how most communities start nearest the water. But
Yeah.
San Diego, Old Town is what had originated, and they didn't start building up the area closer to the water until later. And
Wow.
it went through a lot of evolutions. Like someone tried to start it, it didn't take off. And so then, it kind of actually became again like a really bad area. It was known for bandits and stuff like that. And then someone tried to start it again.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I have learned so much this morning about San Diego that I'm like, I've lived here and I don't know about it. So that is fun. And what a fun way for you to, I just love history, right? I think
I
that
do
would be really
too.
cool to dive into the local part of
Yeah,
that.
no. That's my original major in college was anthropology because I've always really loved history and culture and kind of, how things have evolved. And I unfortunately could not stay awake during the classes. So full honesty there. Ended up switching my major to business, and found that that was a little too dry also. So finally ended with a degree in leisure, youth, and human services with an emphasis on tourism
Okay.
and event planning. And so it's been interesting how everything came full circle for me though. So I've
Yeah.
got a little bit of everything I had went to school for in a business that I never would have expected to be running.
Yeah. That is life, isn't it? Like just that if I think back to what I thought my 20-year-old self thought about what I would be doing or my 25-year-old self, and I'm like, nope, nowhere near what I would have predicted. So,
Right? Exactly.
but
Nowhere
it's
near.
a beautiful ride too at the same time. So
Yes.
awesome. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about books and switch over
Yes.
there. So, um, I know you mentioned you love thrillers, and that's why we have you here, but how in your busyness do you find time to read?
So, like I mentioned, for me, reading's an escape and it's a priority. I would almost say it is my mental health
Mhm.
therapy. For me, it's an escape. I prefer to read fiction. I will audiobook nonfiction.
Okay.
Um, and though I did, I think 2 weeks ago, I audiobooked a thriller for the first time.
Oh,
And it was good. Usually I struggle with remembering all the details when I audiobook,
yeah.
but I don't know if this one was just right. So I think I'm going to try another one.
All
But yeah,
right.
so I read for sure every night. It's almost become where like I have to read in order to start shutting my brain down so I can go to bed. Otherwise, I am just so caught up in my business and everything, that in life that
Yeah.
I use it as kind of like I said, a mechanism to start kind of winding down at night. I also try some mornings to read. I'm not a huge morning person, so for me, reading kind of helps me wake up. I don't drink coffee, so that's kind of my morning coffee.
Yeah. Well, and I could see exactly what you're saying, how it's an escape for you, right? Of the busyness of your day. But if you're focusing on the story, right, it is gonna shut your brain down to the busyness of the day and turn up to paying attention to the story. So what a great way to end the evening. I do the same, and I've realized if I don't read, it takes me longer. I think it takes me longer to fall asleep, or maybe I'm distracted in that window of falling asleep. Or if I fall asleep with the book half open,
Right. Yeah. And that's pretty much every night for me. My Kindle screen is cracked because I fell asleep and dropped it.
oh no.
I now have a rug on the side of my bed. So if
There
that
you go.
happens, like,
I
but
know myself well, so I'm planning for it.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and then so you read a lot of fiction, but you also try to fit in the nonfiction as well. Do
Yeah,
you?
so I follow a lot of local authors for my tours for the obvious reasons.
Mhm.
Just wanting to stay on top of, stories, information. And it's kind of amazing if you're not in the local author like genre regular, you don't necessarily notice it, but there are some amazing local authors that it's another great way to learn about your community. And I feel, as military spouses, as often as we move, that to me is something that's very important because we never really have a home, like, or so by learning more about it, it makes me feel more at home.
Yeah. And I love the exploration aspect of it. I think that's why I think you talk to the variety of military spouses, right? Like some love it, some are okay with it, some are like, "Meh, this is not for me." And for me, it's getting to explore a new area and find all these new places and all these new things. And I think doing
Yeah.
it through local authors is a
Yeah.
great way to do that.
Yeah. And I always feel, as far as like the moving, kind of like you were saying with I look at it as like an extended vacation. We're getting to travel.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's even amazing to see how within the US alone, there's so many differences, East Coast, West Coast. We lived in Georgia. Georgia's like its whole own state with its culture.
Yeah.
I learned I love sweet tea. And had I not lived there, I wouldn't have known I love sweet tea.
Yeah. Yep, my cousins live there, so I've been down there and I actually love it though. It kind of reminds me of the Midwest a little bit, and like people are super friendly and where they live is a beautiful area, so I enjoyed
Yeah.
visiting them there. How do you find out about the local authors in the area that you moved to?
So I actually started following local bookstores.
Okay.
A lot of them will do author signings with local authors.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I have been to two book signings here in Jacksonville and picked up two books. No, I take that back. I've been to three. And also my library.
Okay.
So our libraries here do a lot of author talks and
Yeah.
bring in guest authors. And it's been crazy because, I started the idea of doing the tour, and then a friend reached out to me and was like, hey, there's a local author who is giving a talk about a new book he's releasing. It's about the architecture around town. And I
Cool.
was like, okay. She goes, but what I think you're really going to be interested in is he has written a book about the murders in town. I was like,
Wow.
really? So I attended his signing for his architecture book in order to get his murder book signed. I was probably the only person there who was like, do you have any of the murder books with you? And can I get it signed instead of the architecture one?
Oh, that's so fun. And then, so you have prepared for us a thriller book flight today. And you've
Yes.
even given us different types in the thrill, like subgenres almost of the thriller. So I'm very excited about that. Why don't you start by telling us what the first book of the pairing is today?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with a newer book. Of the three that I've brought today, I've got some throwbacks, but this one is The Devil's Trill, and it's by N.B. Saltzman. It's actually her first book that she wrote, or I should
Okay.
say published. And it's amazing to me, just knowing how hard it can be to write, and to then even, when you're writing fiction, adding a narrative, outside of that conversation, just really kudos to her for her first book. It's a
Wow.
series. I will say all of the books that I brought are series. I'm a
Okay.
serial reader. I love to dig in and just get to know the characters. And sometimes I'm not a fan of that feeling at the end where you're like left with, but I want to know more. So
Yeah.
series are my preferred reading. It also makes it easier with as many books as I read a year to not have to pick a new book every
Yeah.
time. I can just roll through the series.
Yeah, you don't have that daunting task of, oh, what am I going to read next?
Right, exactly. So, but with The Devil's Trill, there's four books in the series. Of the four, three of them are published. The fourth one is set to be out the end of this year.
Okay.
So in December, I was lucky enough to read an ARC, so an
Oh,
advanced reader
yay.
copy. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was just like I said, just so amazing. I didn't want to put it down. It's a supernatural thriller.
Okay.
And it's the storyline to me is very unique and interesting. It's about Dr. Kayla Winslow. She is a PhD. So she's not a professor really. She works for Harvard, but she's like a researcher.
Okay.
And she specializes in religion, but particularly demonology. Now, it's not because she's like enamored with it in regards to like she believes in it. It's actually the opposite. She believes it doesn't exist.
Okay.
And so that's why she studies it.
All right.
And so she's considers herself an atheist, and she's really just kind of out to prove like this doesn't exist.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, in the book, it does. So, but the author starts pairing kind of Christianity with Greek mythology and starts
Wow.
bringing all these different religions kind of together to one, which makes for a really interesting melting pot.
Okay.
And it also, I guess personally, my husband and I have had discussions like regarding like, who's to say whose religion is correct. And so for her take on like there isn't one correct religion, it's all kind of been mixed, but over time the pieces have been pulled out and and almost telephoned, and that they've kind of started to become
Yeah.
misinterpreted and split. It was just a really thoughtful piece, but in a fun fictional way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And I've always loved reading about books of other religions just to learn about them, right? Like things I didn't
Right.
know. It's not a path of my life, but it's always been fascinating to me to learn about that. So this would be a fun way to explore it even more because sounds like a totally different way to read about it.
Exactly. And she ends up developing becoming, I guess, friends with who would be considered Lucifer. But their spin on hell is very different, I think, than what kind of our standard world thinks of it today, too. It's painted as almost kind of more of a the Dante's Seven Circles,
Oh
but
yeah.
even still different than that. But how like there's a lesser hell, a harder hell, like, and so yeah, it's just very interesting. And I thought her creativity in that manner was so well, done, because to paint a picture so different from what we see, that's to me what fictional writing truly is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And that's truly where the escape will come, right? Because it's so
exactly.
different from our standard day that
Yeah.
we're like, oh, this is so cool. I've never thought I liked fantasy, and this is kind of what spurred me to do this podcast. And I've discovered I love it because it is a total escape from my everyday.
Right. Exactly. No, yeah. And that's I love reading all sorts of books. I do fantasy, I do notice, so I stick more to the mystery, the thriller, the romance. Those are probably my key ones, but I do like Hunger Games, stuff like that, Harry
Yeah.
Potter, those were all ones I've read and really enjoyed. They're just good books. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So I will admit, I feel like sometimes I steer clear of thrillers because I'm a night reader. And I'm like, I don't want the story to keep me up at night. Like if it's really
Yeah.
creepy or um
So I would say like these, and this is what I was thinking too. I was like, these I would consider light thrillers.
okay,
Like these,
perfect.
I don't do creepy thriller either. Like I don't do horror.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
do
probably a better
horror
way to say it.
movies.
Yeah.
I actually do not do horror movies. I have vivid dreams, so I have nightmares. Like I can't do that. I don't do like Halloween horror.
Okay.
What are they? The walkthrough thing? No, thank you.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I would consider these, like I said, light thrillers. They're more of keeping you on your toes in the story with, spinning you in different directions, bringing, really, and these making you think.
Yeah.
And so there are some heavy thrillers that are a lot more psychological that really almost leave you tired afterwards because they are flipping you around in the story so much. These are not flipping you that much. I mean, they throw curves at you, but not anything too crazy.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, if there's that mystery component going along as well, I think that would be enough to do it. But I will admittedly say that that is why I think I've avoided the thriller genre because I was always like, well, will I sleep after I read them? So I'm glad to hear you say that the differentiation between horror and thriller, because maybe that's more what I mean when I say that I didn't think this genre was for me, because
Yeah.
horror would
And
probably be where what would push me there.
yeah. And I think, also within the thriller, like we were saying, we've got subgenres. There's
Hmm.
probably some that are more borderline horror thriller. And then these are kind of what I consider light.
Okay.
Definitely more pleasurable reading than, yeah, like you said, get you gripped in that, oh my gosh, I can't sleep now, or
Yeah, better go check all my locked doors in my
right.
house
Yeah,
and
no, none of that. Yeah. Unless you
awesome.
truly believe in Lucifer and that he's going to show up on your doorstep.
Okay, all right. So, and then do you follow this doctor through the next books in the series as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's actually, so when I read the arc, she didn't have like any of the other books released, or like any, sometimes, they'll do the pre-sale or they'll have the storyline,
Sure.
kind of the little verbiage paragraph put together. She didn't have any of those put together. And so I knew she was turning it into a series though. Uh, and the story did not take the route I thought it was going to take at all.
Okay.
At all. And it's been great. Like I could not put it down, but I was kind of floored at the direction it went. And so
Okay.
again, her creativity was so much more than mine was in regards to the
Awesome.
story.
Well, I love that. Okay, so that was The Devil's Trill by N.B.
Yes.
Saltzman. What's the second book of our pairing today?
Yeah. So the second book of our pairing is First to Die by James Patterson.
Okay.
And he is a very well-known author. He has published so many books, but this is another series by him, and it's called The Women's Murder Club.
Okay.
And all the books in this series have the number of the book in the title.
Oh,
So he
fun.
is on
Okay.
book 23 and counting.
All right. Wow.
Yep. And 23 was just released this well, I guess I can't say this month because we're in June now.
Okay.
It was released in May.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So, listeners, that could give you a whole chunk of books to listen to if you jump into these James Patterson's one. Um, my friend was just telling me actually about a he writes like middle grade YA books as well. And she's like, I think your son would really like them. They're really fun. And I was like, oh, I'll have to. I didn't know. I only thought he was a writer for adults.
Yeah, so he mostly writes mysteries, but he launched that like middle school youth age books. And yeah, his like I said, he has so many books. And he's a really great writer. His The Women's Murder Club actually came out in 2001.
Okay.
And when we had discussed, chatting about these books, I was like, gosh, it's been a long time since I've read that book. So I
Yeah.
went back and reread it. And it is kind of hilarious because they talk about like, oh, they've got pagers. But it's fun to read those sometimes. And they almost take you back to
Yeah.
when pagers were around.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah. So I have not read the entire series. I think I've read like books 1 through 10 because at the time I was reading it, that was all that was written.
Sure.
So I'm super excited to go back. I'm going to read the whole series again. I'm on book 3 now.
Nice.
And I'm going to read through to 23. And probably by the time I get there, he'll be at 25. So
Well, you'll have to keep us posted, Rae, how this progress goes, because I would love to hear it. Do you think that these books need to be picked up in order?
yes, I
Okay. All
would
right.
pick them up in order because they sometimes will revisit past crimes
Okay.
in the books.
All right.
And so just a little about this series. So it's a suspense thriller. So it's going to follow a little more of kind of like a CSI style. The book's about a homicide detective. Or sorry, the Women's Murder Club is about 4 women
Okay.
who come together, and they're an unlikely pairing. Well, kind of, but so it's a homicide detective, a medical examiner, a newspaper journalist, and the assistant district attorney.
Okay.
And they come together to help solve cases. So the cases will be the homicide detective's case, and she'll call the girls together at a Mexican restaurant for margaritas where they chat these cases and they
Okay.
solve them together. And
Wow.
so it's a super fun read, particularly as I'd say a female standpoint, because you can just picture these ladies as friends, but also colleagues.
Yeah.
And they help each other through personal stuff. But they're also working through these cases. And just really, like I said, really fun. But it's also a thriller. So it does take you for spins.
Okay.
We get, possibly people being kidnapped and this, like people being shot at, different stuff like that,
Sure.
to keep you on your toes. And then interestingly, this at one point was made into a TV show.
Okay. That's so fun.
So it only had 1 season, sadly. I loved it.
Oh, okay.
Um, Yeah, yeah. So don't, if you're one of those people like kind of like me who like gets really caught up in the seasons, maybe wouldn't do it because it's only one.
Okay.
Um, but it was really good, I thought. Maybe I need to go back and watch it now, and I maybe not won't think that this time. Um, but yeah, like I said, the to me, what drew me into these books was I think the 4 women supporting each other and seeing them work together, but also be there personally.
Yeah. And do the characters then they also persist in the series as well? Like they're
Yes.
okay. Yeah. And I love that because then I feel like you really feel like you get to know the characters. So it almost gets this cozy feeling a little bit because you're
Yep.
just stepping back in with the same characters and you're like, okay, I kind of know them. And but solving a
Yep. And
murder
so
or a mystery at the same time.
exactly. And you go through their relationships with them, one gets pregnant and so then you go through that. And like you say, you just start building that relationship with the characters and really learning and kind of getting brought into the story.
Awesome. Okay. So that was First to Die, and that's by James Patterson, and it's the Women's Murder Club. And then what's the last book of the pairing today?
So the last book of the pairing is The Surgeon by Tess Gerritsen. And this series is Rizzoli and Isles.
Okay.
It has currently 13 books. And it also was published originated in 2001, which
Okay.
I thought was interesting that I happened to pick two books from the same year,
Yeah.
going back that far too.
Well,
So
they've stuck with you
with
that long.
it, right. And that's how I knew these were good books because
Yeah.
they have stuck with me for over 20 years. And this series or this subgenre is it's a medical thriller.
Okay.
And I looked it up and because it does. So I went back and reread this book too before I talked today. Within it has a lot of medical terminology. And so I looked up last night. The author's a physician.
Oh, okay. All right.
So totally makes sense that it's a medical thriller. Similar feel in that it's about a homicide detective. And eventually in the series, she befriends the medical examiner.
Okay.
And so we hear the stories from both of their sides. In the very first book, we don't have the medical examiner yet.
Okay.
But eventually, like I said, the series goes on to be about Jane Rizzoli and Maura Isles. Jane's the homicide detective, and Maura is the medical examiner.
Okay.
Interestingly, this was also made into a TV series.
All right.
Now, it had 7 seasons.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. And the homicide detective from Women's Murder Club, its series, she is the exact same actress who plays the homicide detective in Rizzoli and Isles. So it's Angie Harmon.
Okay.
Right. So there's some crossover. Not only were these two books, series published and launched in
Sure.
the same year, but even though the TV series for Women's Murder Club, the TV series was in 2007. For Rizzoli and Isles, it was in 2010. They used the same lead actress for the homicide detective. So it's kind of
Oh,
interesting, the
that's fun.
crossovers.
Yeah. Okay. And then is that one, it's not, it just was 7 seasons. It's not coming out with any other seasons for the TV series.
No,
Okay.
so it ran 7 seasons starting in 2010 is when it
Okay.
ran. So it won't have any new episodes.
Okay. Are there
But it was
further books coming out in the series?
so she did just publish one, I think last year is when book 13 came out. And there
Okay.
was a big gap because if I remember correctly, book 12 was maybe like 2017.
Okay.
And then 2022 is when book 13 came out. So I'm not sure if I haven't read 13 yet. Again, at the time that I read these, I think I probably read like 1 through 7 or 1
Sure.
through whatever was published. So I'm gonna go back and reread this entire series and catch up on the books I missed. So I'm not sure if 13 is maybe a closing of the series or if she's picked it back up again.
Okay. All right. Well, that's awesome. Okay. So that was The Surgeon by Tess Gerritsen. So normally I finish the show with bonus pairings, which are just a speed round of questions. So you can just answer these really quick. So, where is your favorite place to read?
My favorite place to read. Oh gosh. I would love to say the beach, but I swear it's like I get sunburned, the glare is there, like
Yep.
it's like you think that's your dream place, but it's unfortunately it's not. I'm gonna just say my bed. Like that's
Okay.
kind of where in the mornings if I get to read, or maybe my couch because then my dogs can both snuggle with me too.
Okay.
So I'm
Awesome.
kind of boring.
No, mine's in my house too because that's just the nature of my life. So, what is one book you have read that has changed your life?
Oh my gosh. Oh, one book I have read that has changed my life. Oh man, that's a really hard one.
Okay.
Um, so I'm gonna throw back really, really far. I'm gonna go with, and this is gonna sound absolutely horrible, but I'm back in high school. I read books about Jeffrey Dahmer and Jack the Ripper. And I
Okay.
honestly feel like that's probably what unknowingly set me on the trajectory of where I'm at now today.
Yeah.
That's not one book, but like I said, when I was in high school, I just became really kind of infatuated with the stories of why are these people doing this? How do they get away with it? Like trying to, I guess, figure out the psychological piece of it. And I think
Sure.
that's what's always intrigued me with serial killers and true crime and that type of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. No, I could totally see where that would, because now that's what your career is, right? So, and then are you a rereader?
So no,
Okay.
which is contrary to what I just said about rereading these series. But
Yeah.
I guess maybe after 20 years, I make an exception.
Yeah. Yeah. By that
Uh,
point, you've probably forgot some of the details, so it'd be a good way to revisit.
right. Yeah. No, generally I'm a once and done. And just uh I could probably name on one hand the books I have reread. Just
Okay.
I enjoy new stories and maybe kind of fitting in with that mystery side of it. Like I want the kind of the mystery of not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I also prefer to read the book before I watch a movie or the TV show or whatever's being. I don't want the movie or the show to spoil the book, so I prefer to read it first.
Yeah. I'm a purist in that way myself. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
So, right now, I'm like I said, working my way through the Women's Murder Club. So,
Awesome.
I am on the next book in that series. That'll probably tie me up for a while. And then I'm probably take a break and then I'll switch back over to the Rizzoli and Owls and finish through that series then too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate your time and I'm so glad I could have you on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I love getting to nerd out on books. It's fun.
Yay. You're so welcome. Thank you so much for listening to my chat today with Rae Walaska and her thriller book flight. We'd love to know what other books you might pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information on today's flight and any other books that we talked about today. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are picking up next, especially if you have heard about the book on the show, please tag us. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. This is a brand new show, so if you enjoyed it, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give the show a review. Your review not only helps me, but it also helps the show reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure that you will not miss an episode. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.